Hello, everyone. This is Ashley Tucker from My Favorite Things. I have a cute Valentine's Day card to share with you today. I can't believe that it's almost Valentine's Day. It's just around the corner. It's already February. I can't believe it. I feel like it was just Christmas. My brother came over to visit the other day, and he's like, "Why do you still have your Christmas tree up?" And it's just like, I don't want Christmas to end. I want it to stretch out as much as possible. I did finally take the Christmas tree down the other day, but it's a little sad every time I gotta take it down. I don't know about you guys, but I love the Christmas season. But on to Valentine's Day. Sorry for the rambling. I feel like I'm talking a little bit too fast. I'm going to try to calm down a little bit. I did just have a bunch of caffeine, and caffeine tends to make me a little bit jittery and talk too fast. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit as I explain this card. So I've got this little gnome image here. This comes from the Love to My Gnomies stamp set. I stamped this using my Misty tool, using a Copic-friendly black ink, and I stamped that onto some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. For the coloring on this gnome, I decided to stick with my purple Copics. I was going to make the heart pink at first, but as I was coloring it, I thought that the purple would stand out really well on the card that I was planning, so I went with that deep purple. I also went through my pink Copic markers, and I couldn't find a shade of pink that was exactly what I was looking for. They were all just a little bit off, so I think that the purple was a good decision. Next, I worked on the background for the card. Now, the really great thing about this card design is you can make your own background for it, or if you want the card to be a little bit easier, you could just use some pattern paper. I was actually at first planning on using pattern paper for the background, but as I started creating this, I decided that I was just really in the mood to make my own background. So I have a piece of Neenah Solar White, and I blended on that with some Distress Oxide inks in the colors Spun Sugar, Seedless Preserves, and Wilted Violet. I then let that dry for quite a while. Distress Oxide ink stays wet for a long time, so if you're going to emboss on it like I am here, you need to make sure that it's totally dry. Maybe even test it by pouring some powder on it before stamping and seeing if the powder comes off the paper. So once I was sure the background was totally dry, I went over it with a powder bag to prepare it for embossing, and then I stamped this background on it. This is the Never Ending Love background, and I stamped that with Versamark ink, and then I embossed it with a clear embossing powder. Once the embossing was done, I went back over the top with the Distress Oxide inks to deepen up the color, and this time I actually added in a fourth color. I added in the Villainous Potion color, which is that really, really deep purple. One tip that I have for if you're blending on top of embossing, once you're done with the blending, grab a dry cloth or a paper towel and wipe off your work because the ink is actually going to sit on top of that embossing. The embossed lines will resist the ink, but the ink will also just sit right on top of it, so you want to clean that off. All right, so now my background is done. I grabbed my tape runner and I adhered that background onto an A2 size card. Next, I grabbed an A2 panel of cardstock, so this is cut to 5.5 by 4.25, and I picked out this die, and I'm going to put it right along the bottom there and run that through my die machine. Now this die is actually from the Serene Sunset die set, which is actually meant for creating landscapes, but I decided that this die would make a really fun edge. I really like the look of this wonky, curvy edge. And you could actually use lots of different dies for that edge. You just want to find a die in your stash that's going to make an interesting border. This next die is the Heartfelt Love Die, and I'm going to line that up along that wonky edge that I made and tape it down. And then I'll run this panel through my die cutting machine so that those letters get cut out and I'll have the negative space there. Now, eventually I'm going to be popping this up on my card, but before I do that, I want to stamp a sentiment on it. I picked out this sentiment, which says Happy Valentine's Day. This is from the Itty Bitty Love stamp set, and I stamped that with VersaFine Onyx black ink. Once that sentiment was dry, you want to make sure that it's dry so that it doesn't smear. I then added foam tape to the back of the panel and popped it up on the top edge of my card. I then grabbed the little gnome that I colored in earlier, which I cut out with the coordinating die, and I'm popping that up so that the heart that he's holding is right over the top of the heart for the love. For the finishing touches on this card, I first grabbed my white gel pen and I added some highlights to the gnome. Then I picked out a bunch of different sequins and spread them across the card, and I glued those down with some liquid adhesive. And finally, I decided to add just a little bit of sparkle. So I took my glitter brush and I went over the middle of the heart. I didn't want to go over the area where I used the gel pen because the gel pen will smear if you go over it with a brush. So just a tiny bit of sparkle in the middle, and then this card was all done. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this card design and that it gave you some ideas for your own Valentines. And I hope you have a wonderful day today, and I'll see you next time.